Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you all being here. To get started, I'm going to read our requirement here. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A14, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are myself, Ann Johnson, Jesse Warren, Christine Hirsch-Putnam, Margaret Eldridge, Monty Harris, Peggy Gilgis, and Terry Kent. The opportunities for the public to access in the electronic meeting are posted in the Albemarle County website, on the Board of Supervisors homepage, and on the Albemarle County calendar. Thanks, EJ. So just a quick attendance. We have great participation today. So I think the only committee member who's absent, Peggy, is we're missing, why can't I remember?
Navarre
is missing, yes.
Yeah.
Might join us.
He said he would try to make it. I don't know if I should have probably reminded him this morning, but he would have gotten the emails, so.
Yeah, okay. So did everybody have a chance to?
And is Terry here?
Yes, Terry is here. I have her on the.
Oh, there she is. Sorry. Okay. Yep. I see her. I'm sorry.
Yep. So I'm hoping folks had a chance to review the, that should say June minutes. Sorry about that. And if not, let me know. But if so, let's proceed with a motion to approve the June minutes.
I move to approve the June minutes. This is Christine.
Okay, can we get a second?
Sure, I'll second it. This is Margaret.
Thanks. Is there anybody who doesn't approve of the minutes? I think that's the easiest way to do it. Okay, so with no one disapproving, we will assume that the June minutes are approved. Thanks very much. So just in terms of old business, we had run through pretty much everything that we had. Terry and I still need to connect on a sort of communications issue. So I kept that on there. But I thought we would start out with Lance today. He has some updates for us and some things that he's learned from his research. So I thought we would start with him doing his report out.
Good evening, everybody. I don't have a PowerPoint today. Although EJ is going to be assisting with something, and I know she's got some talking points. But the first bullet was in sort of an overview of the hauler requirements, case studies, and sort of path forward outline by GBB. And I'm sorry to say that my week completely got away from me. I've had some twists and turns this week, and so I'm not fully prepared to talk about that. I will say that one of our first steps is to, begin, have a discussion with the city to see if there's any interest in coordinating our hauler requirements, so that, we can address some of the issues that involve with basically haulers moving from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, in a single trip or throughout the day, but also just to ensure that we have the opportunity to at least explore some collaborative opportunities that the case studies revealed could be worth pursuing. And I bring that step up about a discussion with Charlottesville, because I learned earlier this week that the city staff person who's had the lead role for the GBB study that they're undergoing, a bigger community-wide effort, but still, has been timed really nicely with us. And they're getting, they're at the gotten sort of a draft deliverable and are getting ready to move it forward. But the person who's been leading that effort put in his notice last week. So I have reached out to the Public Works Director to try to determine whether they are going to pause for now until they hire they replace that person, or whether they're going to delegate it to someone else. So I don't think that that's necessarily a critical path item for the work that we have to do, and I do apologize for not being prepared today to walk you through the overview that I intended to do.
Lance, I think one thing, maybe you don't have to go into details, but I think just letting the group know some of the points you shared with me last week, just that you've learned that beyond the way we were thinking about hauler requirements, you know, in your research, you've identified some other opportunities.
Yeah, certainly. I'd say the one that seems pretty obvious that we should pursue are some basic requirements about basically, you know, covered loads to, you know, the spray of litter, things falling off. Trucks as they're, you know, going back and forth to landfills or transfer stations. There's also some good examples of agencies that have had, you know, vehicle maintenance requirements and fuel efficiency requirements that they ask people to work toward and mandate, which I think is very interesting. And also, you know, some even have like service districts with price guarantees for curbside collection, so that, you know, there's equal access across the communities to, you know, same services at the same prices, but also can make those zones more efficient to operate in terms of fuel efficiency and cost efficiency. And in some areas, you know, that is you know, done in a coordinated fashion between, you know, multiple cities within a county and the county itself. You know, either on a coordinated basis or by you know, their basically by a third-party utility or authority like the Solid Waste Authority. So there's definitely a lot for us to consider in terms of options that could be compelling for us beyond the kind of basics of, you know, making sure that we have data to track that could advance some of the objectives of you know, this committee and our organization.
Great. That's great info for us to have. Liz?
These situations that you looked at, Lance, these were all Virginia.
I asked them to, for each of the case studies, we had them look at a Virginia locality and then a best practice locality from around the nation. So we did get some insights into, you know, what people in, you know, other states could be doing that's, you know, best practice, and either that we, you know, we may be able to do, and it's just that nobody in Virginia is doing it, or we might not be able to do it, but we might choose to pursue the possibility of that.
Okay. And one more quick question. I won't keep this up too much, but on the service districts, you're talking about having multiple haulers. They just or whoever wants to do it. I don't know about multiple haulers, but it wouldn't be contracting with one hauler. It would be different haulers coming into an area with some kind of guaranteed price. Is that what that scenario was?
Yeah, I think that you know, in the one locality in the study that they put out like requests for proposals, and organizations could bid for the right to serve an area. Yeah. So they wouldn't be directly under contract to us, but they'd be allowed service to a zone based on you know, their agreement to comply with the overall requirements in terms of pricing and other hauler requirements that are within that.
Okay, so there could be multiple people, multiple haulers that that met that RFP.
Mhm.
So you
It just
wouldn't be
provides a
excluding
standard
anything.
service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Lance, one other thing you mentioned was just the discussion that Charlottesville is having on the plastic bag tax. Is there an update on that?
Well, that Charlottesville and Albemarle and a lot of other communities in the state are now having. And EJ asked her to get with our finance department, who's got the lead on this, make sure that the information that we have is current. So I'll turn this part of the discussion over to EJ.
Thanks, Lance. So just for the benefit of everyone in the group, we had to have an enabling authority from the General Assembly before we could institute a plastic bag tax. In the 2020 General Assembly, the counties were given that enabling authority, the ability to impose a disposable plastic bag tax on grocery stores, drugstores, and convenience stores. And even though we got it in the 2020 Assembly, really staff felt it was prudent to not try to work through that tax during COVID. Really, our community was burdened enough without putting that on top of it. So right now, staff is researching the new enabling legislation, and they plan to bring that information forward to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration in the FY23 budget development cycle. Right now, there are Supervisor Price?
I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead and finish, and then I'll ask my question.
Oh, okay. Right now, we've got 2 localities in Virginia who are already going ahead with the tax, and that's Roanoke City and Alexandria. Roanoke City is going to put implement their plastic bag tax in January of next year. The state said basically that until a locality implemented the tax, they would not start putting in the regulations. So that now that Roanoke City is going to do that, the state's going to come behind and essentially backfill on the regulations for that. And so it'll be helpful to the rest of us considering this tax option to see what the Assembly, what the legislation puts into place as far as regulations. We do know from other localities that it's likely to be a diminishing revenue stream as people change their behavior and find alternatives. That's really the whole purpose to a plastic bag tax. So when speaking to finance, when you talk to money people, they like to prep you for what the revenue stream will look like and what you should think about as far as what you might be able to use it for. So understanding that it's probably diminishing, you're not going to want to look to use it for something that's an ongoing process or procedure. There is also the law also limits what you can use the revenue stream for. So it's WIC benefits, SNAP benefits, also mitigating pollution and litter, programs, education programs designed to reduce environmental waste. So there are a lot of options for the county as far as where they might want to put the money that comes in. But we're looking a couple of years out before we'll see that money up for consideration for different programs. That's a report I have. Supervisor Price?
Thanks, EJ. Would you repeat? I think you mentioned 3 types of stores that you can implement the bag tax on. Is it drugstores, convenience stores, and gas stations?
Grocery stores.
Grocery stores. Okay, thank you. That was the one I missed. I wanted to make sure that was included. Otherwise, I was seeing a real problem.
So general retail is exempt?
No. I just got a draft of the Virginia Department's disposable plastic bag tax guidelines, and larger retailers that contain a grocery store, convenience store, or drugstore are subject to the tax.
Got it.
So I will let y'all know that as you get into the world of convenience stores, stop and goes, grocery stores, gas stations, you will find that how they get classified often by how much of something that they do. So how much food do they prepare, or how much prepared food do they serve? So again, the regulations that we see, the assembly, the clarifications that we're going to see coming out of Richmond over the next year or so are going to be very, very important for us as we move forward. Supervisor Price, is that a legacy hand or a new?
No, that's a new one. Thanks. AJ, I really appreciate that part because I think one of the concerns, when we were talking about a cigarette tax with the Board of Supervisors, one of the areas that came up for discussion is a disparate treatment and impact. And if we have certain types of businesses that are subject to the tax and others are not, then we may inadvertently risk, if we were to go with the tax, adversely affecting certain businesses, when in reality, what we really want to do is eliminate or greatly reduce plastic bags across the board, I would think anyway. Thank you.
Absolutely. The tax is really just like the cigarette tax, is about changing a habit within our community and not about generating hundreds of thousands of dollars for the coffers.
Hey,
Other questions? Monty.
Sorry. I pointed this out. To my knowledge, the ABC does not require alcohol to be bagged. Like you can walk. I've walked out of an ABC store with a liquor bag, with the handle of liquor. They default. They want to put it in a bag. I was like, I don't want it in a bag. They're like, you don't have to have it in a bag. But you can go to a number of particularly 7-Elevens around Charlottesville and other places where if you buy a 6-pack or individual beers, it's the store policy that it's got to be in a bag. And I'll ask somebody, I'll see people, I was like, some of the clerks don't know where the policy comes from. Some say it's just the owner. But to me, I mean, that's one area, if we could just get the word out that they don't have to do it, and then to some degree try to shame or reward or whatever the people that keep doing it. I mean, it's just, you go to 7-Eleven, somebody takes a 40, one of those tall boys of beer and puts it in a plastic bag and they got to walk out with it. Sorry, it's my pet peeve.
Well, since convenience stores are going to be a designated, under this rule, I think that will go away one way or the other. It sounds like they'll have to move to a paper bag or no bag. But that's an interesting, I didn't realize that wasn't a state policy. So we should probably do a little research on what are the requirements, what has to be bagged.
I'm happy to do that if we think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, if alcohol doesn't have to be bagged, I think that's something that would be helpful to merchants in the community. Are there any other questions on this? Peggy? Oh.
Yeah, I have a question for EJ. When you say that this would come up in the fiscal year 23 development cycle, what does that mean to the layman? When is that?
So, wow. If you talk to budget folks, the new fiscal year budget cycle, development cycle starts when the old one ends. So I actually have to get clarification from the budget office, but I can certainly bring back that timeline to the committee. Oh, Lance might know.
Well, I'll just say, it is a longer process. Departments will begin submitting their, operating budgets and then capital budget requests, generally late September, early October. And then, that is worked on by the budget office and the county executive's office throughout the fall and winter, looking at revenue forecasts and all that. And so really I would anticipate that, when items are really going to be brought before the board, would be more like February, where they start having, initial talks about, new programs, emerging needs, what the picture is from a, cost and revenue perspective, and then new things like taxation opportunities. So I would guess that the first conversations would likely be happening in that February, March timeframe.
Of 20.
Yeah, this coming.
Okay.
Liz?
I just wanted to say that there are times when the board gets the first window into something like a new tax in November, December period, depending upon what the schedule is. So it is possible that, typically with something like that, they'll bring it to us a couple times. And then we're really diving in that February and March period. So there's a possibility, not to disagree with Lance, but I know with some of the new programs, we'll sometimes get something earlier than that.
Thank you.
We can certainly ask, or Lance can ask. So.
All right.
So,
Go ahead.
Sorry, Ann. I got an email out of the blue. I think Navarre and Terry got it too. It also went to Rex Linville from Amanda Nelson. Amanda is a friend who works on climate issues with UVA and recycling and found object art and how different art styles can influence people's climate behaviors. Apparently some of her students are interested in hosting a brainstorming session to get people together next week to talk about plastic bag tax efforts in Charlottesville and Albemarle, and they wrote a very nice policy paper that I'm happy to forward along to you all on the topic. Let me forward it, and if anybody would like to meet with them, please let she or I know, and we will organize such a thing.
Great. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks.
All right, any more discussion on the county stuff? Great. All right, well, let's move to planning and vision. And Navarre is here. Welcome back, Navarre.
Thanks. I don't know how long I'll be able to be off mute because the baby's here too.
Oh, that's all right. Well, congratulations to you all. That's very exciting. And we're very excited to have you back. So Peggy, as our de facto chairperson, would you like to do a report out for planning and vision? Oh, you're on mute.
Navarre and I haven't met, and I was hoping I might be able to join meetings with you and Lance about the facilitation of the Chapter 13 changes. So that would be good. I was gonna fill you in. EJ really did it on the status of the bag tax. Because I was sent a copy of the draft regular guidelines from the Virginia Department of Taxation. But I mean, the other thing I wanted to raise is Teddy and I in past years worked on, for the community, the places where you can take things to be reused and what you can do with household hazardous waste. And we have a link to that on the county's website, but it hasn't been updated. And I was thinking that it should be. It's not current. The information is no longer correct. And I'm happy to do that. Teddy did the graphic design for it, and it's beautiful. It's like 3 pages worth of information, and I can't do that. So I can update the information, the content, but in terms of updating the graphic design, I'm wondering if there's someone within the county staff who could take that on.
If not, I can probably take a stab at it. I've done some graphic design stuff for home businesses and whatnot. So.
Okay, great. Because it's on the county's, page. It says like, click here to learn more about where you can take things for recycling or donate them for reuse or sell them secondhand to consignment shops. And, specifics about other forms of household hazardous waste, how and where those can be handled safely, but the information's not correct anymore. I mean, some of it is, but it needs to be updated if we're gonna ask, have community members going there and clicking on the link and going to those pages. And I think that's important.
So who are we working with from the county now, EJ or Lance, if you're still here? on the website?
So first it would come to me, and then I would work with Cape on it. If it's just text and links, Peggy, if
Mhm.
that's all that's incorrect about it, then you can send me the corrected copy. I'm not sure if I quote unquote own that page, but I know Cape owns everything. So we can get that corrected for you.
Okay, great. I mean, I can work with Navarre on it and see if we can get it into an attractive graphic desigin. And if not, we'll hope Kate can do that. Would Kate do that?
Well, probably if you know what, why don't you and I, and maybe you and I, Navarre, get together offline, and let me find out what your needs are, and we'll go through the page together, and I'll try to pull Serena in if possible, and if not, then I'll work to convey the information to her.
Okay, great.
So I'll send out an invitation next week, and you can say whether that time works or not, and we can certainly find a time that works for y'all.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Sure.
And so that's really, I don't have a report other than that.
Okay, I just want to comment on one thing, Peggy. I saw your request to join that meeting with Lance, and I was going to bring it up with him, but I think because we would have 3 SWAAC committee members,
Right, we can't really.
I think we would have to develop an agenda, post it, and make the meeting public.
Okay.
So, but I do think if we're going to specifically talk about the hauler requirements, we could definitely, you Lance and I, we can work it that way as well.
Okay, I want to go back to some of our past minutes about which haulers it would apply to, because I noticed in the minutes we were talking about, well, it's really only GFL now, but I think, Phil, you would know best, or maybe you remember, we had set a threshold that was pretty high for tonnages, and there were some, like Happy Little Dumpster, I think maybe made the threshold, and maybe 1 or 2 other haulers that we would be talking to.
Yeah, I can't remember the list, but yeah, we had a couple 100 tons a year, 100 tons a year, something like that. I forget what it was.
It's in the minutes, so I'll go back and find those.
Yeah, we can find that, because we did have a threshold, and we will want that. Okay. All right, Peggy, if you don't have anything else, I'm going to move this forward to Jesse and the operations subcommittee.
Hi, everybody. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for a minute, and then I'm going to ask Phil for an update on glass, and then I'm going to ask Sharice for an update on the solid waste planning unit. And if they choose not to give it, I'm not going to hold it against them. We tried to have a meeting this month, but we got tripped up under public meeting requirements. First, I didn't get the Zoom link out fast enough, but more importantly, I can't make a webinar. So I will not be having Zoom meetings because I cannot meet the requirements of having a webinar, because even though I have a Zoom license, I do not have the upgraded Zoom license that gives me that capability.
Yeah.
So the only way we are going to be able to meet this month is if we physically meet in person, which is what I wanted to discuss. Is that where we're at now? Because we are relatively inoculated and so on. Okay. Any requests for where?
Okay.
All right. Any requests for where? I'm thinking July 23rd, if that works for people. That's the usual 2 weeks out rhythm. Lunch or bar?
I will say, my apologies, Jesse. Right now, the counties is not meeting, their public meetings are not meeting in person.
Okay.
And so I will, and as this committee flows from the Board of Supervisors, I will check in with the clerk and see if meeting in person is allowed at this juncture. We're in a home stretch to public meetings, meeting in public and in real life. So let me double check on that for you. I would say go ahead and make your plans, but let me check on that.
So, I mean, the bottom line is if that's the case, then we won't be able to have meetings because we can't have webinars and we can't meet in public. If we can meet in public, then I propose either lunch or 5 p.m. on the 23rd. Any preferences?
I'm
I
up
think
for PM,
Did you say 5?
please.
Okay. I mean, I will do it somewhere that serves alcohol because I think that is allowable. And I will just inform the establishment that we will be holding this meeting there. That's what I did last time.
So the vote, I'm sorry, the vote was the 23rd at noon or at 5?
Yeah.
5.
Either work for you? 5 is what we're leaning toward because I could use a beer.
I can do 5 if I have to.
Okay.
Prefer noon, but I'll follow you.
It is entirely driven by the beer. So that is where I stand. Again, I'm not trying to belittle this conversation on a public meeting. I just want everybody to know if we're going to celebrate, we're going to celebrate.
Lan?
So would the protocol include for an offsite public meeting posting of the location?
Yeah.
And agenda so that people can attend if they wish?
Yeah, so last time I think I did it at Cardinal Hall. I called them up and said, look, we're having this meeting. I expect 6 or 7 of us to be there. And we did it. In fact, I think Seaville Coffee was the last place, if that's centrally located. And also I recall serves beer.
The communication subcommittee used Cardinal Hall too, and it's nice because you have outdoor options and as well as indoor
Okay.
options.
Well, I'm going to say 5 p.m. at Cardinal Hall. I'm open to suggestions if people have better ideas, but I will wait to hear from EJ that is legal. And once I hear that it is legal, I will call Cardinal Hall and let them know that we are having a public meeting there at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd, which may not be the best time because it'll be happy hour.
All right. And
So
what next?
Phil, do you have any updates on glass? I know there was some emails with some of our potential vendors.
Yeah, I think I've copied everybody, you guys on, we sent out the glass amounts to Happy Little Dumpster, Big D's Dumpsters, Blue Ridge Dumpster Rental, and Poorville Roll Off. Happy Little Dumpster replied, you got that right? Poorville said, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. We only do 30 yards, so we're no good. And then I haven't heard back anything from Big D's or Blue Ridge.
So Philip.
And I haven't heard anything back from Evergreen because I did forward that to Evergreen.
Okay.
So Phil, can I just ask, is 30 yards the volume of the dumpster? So those are large 30 cubic yards?
Like what you see at a construction site. It's like the ubiquitous Vanderland orange dumpster or roll off.
Gotcha.
Big roll off.
Gotcha.
And it's probably big, way big for most of our glass people.
Okay.
Be a lot of.
It would be an interesting conversation with Nelson County if we could get the Glass Packaging Institute involved in the containers. And I apologize, Liz, I have not reached out to our friend at Nelson County. I have been a little buried lately, but I'm going to get unburied, I promise.
That's okay. And I don't think I got that email. I just checked, Phil, from you. Maybe I wasn't on that.
I think just send it to Terry and Jesse.
Okay.
So I didn't forward it around. I thought it was just a little. Just another side note. A notice from Strategic Materials. They had gone from $25 a ton, paying us down to $5, and now they're going to $0. So I don't know if transportation costs I know have gone up some. I didn't know they'd gone up quite that much, but or whether the value is going down or what the drivers are. But if we start to go where we're paying to get rid of it, that'll be something we have to take up with our board.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is, are you okay with this to 0 to 5? I mean, what's your threshold for the way this doesn't make sense anymore?
Well, I think it becomes a big problem if it's negative, where we have to pay to get them to haul it. I think 0, everybody would agree we can live with that because it's an ad hoc kind of a thing now. I wouldn't want to do thousands of tons a month at 0 because it would take an operator and a lot of equipment time. But I don't know.
I think this would be a case, Jesse, where we should circle back to Scott DeFife, let him know what's happened and that, you know, the economic situation has shifted.
I would love that, just to sort of make sense to verify that what we're hearing. You know, I'm hearing one thing from the only supplier we have, the only vendor.
Right.
So from him, if that sounds like, yeah, that sounds right, or hey, no, that sounds crazy.
Right.
What's going on?
That would,
I'd be happy to catch up with Scott to Fife. I mean, simply put, I guess I can talk to Scott and Phil can talk to Scott and Terry can't talk to Scott because then that would be a meeting.
yeah.
Feel free, you just.
Yeah, I think that's a question. And I think part of the problem is that Strategic Materials has kind of almost a monopolistic role in the value chain. Pace is a competitor. And the interesting thing would be to see if Pace is it all an option for us. But Scott will have the skinny on that.
So I'll reach out to Scott and maybe I'll copy you, Phil, and we'll talk from there. That seems like the most productive way to move forward with that conversation. Anybody except for Terry and Monty is welcome to join. I apologize, folks.
No
It's a
problem.
weird position.
And so we have a number from Happy Little Dumpster on how much it would cost for certain vendors. I'm not sure. Like I know you forwarded me the email, but I might need. We have one vendor and like.
Hold on a second. Let me just.
I just recall that our next step was to take that and see what the winery, the businesses thought of that amount, like if it was doable or not.
Obviously, I had hope. I just forwarded the spreadsheet to everybody, just so you know what we're talking about. I had hoped to get more than one quote, you know, just gives you some range and scope, but this is, you know, so it's what we have.
Okay, thanks for that.
And then I was going to ask Charisse if she had anything she wanted to add about the solid waste planning unit update. I know we've got a meeting coming up on the 13th.
No, because we haven't had a meeting since the last SWAAC meeting.
Okay.
So there's not much to update yet.
I don't know how to ask this, so I'm just going to ask it. Lance, does Marty Stillman still work at Charlottesville?
He's the person that I mentioned has put in his notice, so.
Okay, so.
I did confirm with him that his last day of work isn't, I think, until 2 or 3 more weeks, but he's going to be taking vacation the last 2 weeks.
So we should probably, Charisse, we should probably reach out to Marty and see who's going to replace him with respect to the solid waste planning unit.
Crystal Riddleville.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Okay. Good job, Charisse. Thank you, Lance.
Yep.
Thanks for asking too, Jesse. I was really curious.
All right, Jesse, anything more on your committee?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I will turn it over to Christine in the Outreach and Communication Subcommittee.
Right, thank you. We were not able to meet either because of the meeting requirements. And so, but I did have a couple different conversations, and I can give you an update on, well, for one thing, I just want to, I don't know if everybody knows this, but there is an environmental stewardship hub now, and it's under the community learn more about. And so it's nice because it's got SWAAC is there and information about the climate action plan and the Natural Heritage Committee. So there's some nice opportunities there. And I sent the radio ads out, and so waiting to hear back, and hopefully they'll get published as they'll be out there as PSAs. And then I had a conversation with Melanie, and she brought up something that was really interesting, this Atlas molded products down in Martinsville. they accept styrofoam, and Melanie actually reached out to them. And so I would love to just hear from her if she could talk a little bit about what she learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christine. I did reach out to a Darlene Marshall who works at Atlas, and this was personally just out of my own interest. My family recently bought a new washer and dryer, which came with too much styrofoam around it. And they do have their own collection of number 6 styrofoam at their location in Martinsville. But unfortunately, they don't have, they've tried to actually partner with their own locality, their own, county for sort of a wider collection of that styrofoam, and that wasn't really picked up anywhere. But my conversation with Darlene really did sort of show that they are interested to further connections with other municipalities. And before I even brought up the topic of transportation, she had said that Charlottesville is, relatively close enough that their other transportation initiatives could sort of swing by if there was a pickup location set and a regular set time to haul the styrofoam back to their location. So
Interesting.
Just wanted to share and see if there was any interest or general movement towards recycling styrofoam. Also, just from my very green perspective on this, and being a newcomer, so I'm not entirely sure of what other efforts have been made, but that's an open possibility that that Atlas Molded Products is willing to take a look at. I have their contact information as well, if anyone wants it.
Do with it?
That's
What do
fantastic.
they do with it?
Thank you. That's really
What do
great.
they do with it?
They make it into, they are a sort of packaging company. So they recycle it back into more packaging. Most of their buyers don't acquire scrap. They use the entirety of what they buy, but some businesses across the state do buy and then with whatever they do with it, it turns into some scrap at the end. So Atlas will sort of drive to them to pick up the scrap, which they'll return to their location in Martinsville to recycle it back.
Anne, can you comment on this? Because my understanding is it requires a pretty sophisticated piece of equipment, and ultimately it's releases, nasty chemicals and all this other stuff. So I'd like to be educated. I would like to go down there.
Yeah, I mean, EPS is actually pretty easy to recycle. And it's primarily air. It looks like they make roofing, they make building, so they make roofing and insulation. They do make packaging, cold chain packaging. So I was just looking them up. And they make some molded products too. So the process for recycling EPS is relatively easy. It's a lot of air in it, and it's easy to form. So I'm not certain what process, if they're taking it back down to sort of basic building blocks and then making the EPS beads before they mold it. So we would have to learn more about that. But I think from an environmental process, I don't think it's particularly any more nasty than other. It's the manufacture of the virgin that I think is the principal problem, because they will use perhaps things like propene or other things. I don't know if it's propene, but to blow those, they put something in the mix of the plastic. So when they heat it up, it expands that plastic into the beads. And I'm not certain what that chemical is that's done that, but that's definitely in virgin production. And I don't know if they also use it in recycled production. I will tell you the biggest barrier to EPS recycling is transportation, because you can't compact it. It fills a truck pretty readily. So if they're offering to supply transportation, that's pretty unique. And I will say, for the cost of other pieces, there is an EPS alliance in the US, and they offer grants for recycling, to set up a collection and recycling program. DART is a major EPS producer for packaging in the US, and they and others fund that program. So there would be opportunities to figure out how to do that. So Melanie, thank you very much for just making us aware that there is potentially an opportunity there. And I will say that, the reason we have that around things like appliances is the environmental impact of that foam relative to that washer or dryer is de minimis. If your washer or dryer was damaged, the impact of the steel and the electronics and everything else would dwarf the packaging. So it's just really figuring out why, a place where we can actually do something with these materials. And we're pretty lucky that we have such access to markets, I have to say.
So given that, is it possible, because we definitely know that people when they bring the boxes over to McIntyre, often there'll be those big chunks of styrofoam. I'm wondering for Phil, if that would be a possibility of having a bin there, that especially if it could be picked up, could that be a potential where we could, pilot it and give it a try?
I think it's certainly possible. I mean, it's all, we'd want to discuss it with our stakeholders because there'd be cost involved, but it's certainly something possible. The logistics of how to get it to them, I'd love to talk to them, Melanie, if you could send some contact information. Because, Anne, I think you were the nail on the head. The problem with shipping that stuff is you're shipping air. So it's hard to get we don't normally think of shipping costs as a price per pound or ton. Well, you're shipping air, so that's pretty pretty tough. So you're going to have to rethink how you do it. I think you'd want to run something like a compactor. I'm sort of spitballing here, just to get the air between the styrofoam blocks removed.
Yeah.
And to crush that down, but that would depend on, again, talking to what would they call it, Atlas, and see what form they want this stuff in. Maybe they want it undisturbed. I don't know.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, all things are possible.
Yeah, I think there is. I will tell you that there are certain stores like Home Goods and things like that, EPS is actually one of their major challenging waste streams back of house. People who sell furniture have a ton of EPS back of house, and that all gets disposed. So, and they have no room to manage it. So there is a very sort of slick piece of equipment that actually takes EPS and makes it into very compact bricks. It essentially takes the air out of it. And, that's what, if you're a really large generator, that's what you do. So it would be an interesting pilot to see if this was offered, how much would actually show up, so really interesting. So let's have that as an action item to share the contact information, and we'll do some follow-up and figure out
Thanks, Melanie.
What would be possible. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for everybody's feedback.
So what else do you have for us, Christine?
Well, it's been really hot over at McIntyre in terms of, I think I reported that last time, but I was not there last weekend, trying to get there when it's a little bit cooler. So we have had a drop off of volunteers. And just one thing I'd like to throw out is the possibility of putting up some no idle signs, because people idle there quite a bit, and just interesting to generating more heat. But we'll just continue to work on getting, hopefully as it cools off, getting more volunteers over there. But I'm really excited to have Lindsay here, and Monty and her have been having some conversations around helping to support composting and recycling in the county public schools. So I'd love to just turn it over to Monty and Lindsay for that, an update of their conversation. And in terms of meeting, actually, before I do that, our next meeting, it sounds like our only opportunity would be, again, to meet in person, and maybe we should meet at 6 o'clock at Cardinal Hall on the 23rd. And then Monty can just walk on over after his other meeting.
I like that.
As long as you don't drink too much beer, or maybe that helps. I don't know.
I won't.
There's something out real quick, Monty. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just forgot to throw this out before. We did a survey back in the last week of June. Customer counts at McIntyre, 2,807 for the week, which is our second highest since we've been recording.
Wow, that's fantastic, Phil.
Sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want to forget that.
Can you just say that number again? 2,000 and what?
Oops, sorry, 2,807.
Got it.
That was just at McIntyre in over the course of a
June 21st to July 2nd.
Definitely. There were a lot of people when we were there on that Sunday. There were a lot of people that were just driving right past the person who was counting. So, it was kind of hard to flag people down.
How did that break down between county and city users? Do you know?
1705 county, 980 city, and 122 from elsewhere.
Wow.
Thanks.
Sorry to interrupt again.
All right, Monty and Lindsay. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, so I think y'all tell me anything you want me to add. I've circulated an email that, I reached out to Lindsay in May, and she's been very kind of helpful and responsive. And she told me to follow up again here in mid-June, late June, which I did, and we've reconnected. And I've kind of put out all the information to everybody, and we can kind of drill down into any of that. If anybody missed it, let me know. And the big questions, the outstanding items seem to be, COVID driven, of not knowing what the cafeteria plan was. And that Lindsay hopes to have that in a couple of weeks, but doesn't control when she receives that. But that the great news is, it sounds like pretty much every one of our schools has everything for recycling, has a potential to be able to compost, and devil's in the details. And we just need to get a right plan and a way to get it going. Lindsay, kind of give it to you.
Sure. No, we had, before the pandemic, we had 8 locations composting. That was about half and half between just kitchen, back of house, and ones that were doing it inside the school as well. Our most successful ones to date with the kids have probably been elementary schools, just because it's more controlled. They release it per table, and there are more TAs in those spaces. So those have tended to be the most successful that we've had so far. After our conversation yesterday, Monty, I spoke to our director of child nutrition, and she's feeling it out, but she thinks we should be able to do back of house at all the schools beginning next year, which I think will be nice to have just that infrastructure there. And then we can maybe ease in, isn't the right term, but kind of bring the very interested schools on board first, and then push the ones that aren't as happy about it. That also had a conversation about potentially having a stipend position at each school location for something like, you include in that email, but like a climate action coordinator, climate action plan implementer, like somebody on site that's that school person, but that would have to wait for the 22-23 budget cycle as a separate budget initiative. But I think that would allow us to take this next year to pick up interested schools and then roll out further when we have that position, and kind of be able to reward the people that have stepped into it without a stipend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds great. Lindsay, I'm wondering if maybe you could just share with you your thoughts on like what has made some of the programs really successful, in terms of what they tell the kids, So if we're thinking about wanting to just put together a model program, to support this at schools, just interested in what you think we could do to help.
The most successful ones have had a lot of support at the beginning, like literally in the cafeteria, helping the kids go through different items. And it takes a lot of time. So that's time intensive. I've done it in the past with interns who have just stayed there for 2 weeks during the lunch periods, which could be, up to 4 or 5 lunch periods, just educating the kids as they walk up. And then they're pretty, I'm not going to say they're set, but then it could just take one person to help guide kids who have forgotten or just need a little more help. Secondary schools, it might take a monitor there just to make sure we're not getting a bunch of contamination in the compost stream. But the most successful have been somebody, and Monty talked to Miss Crummy at Crozet Elementary, it's the ones who have an interested advocate on site. That's why I really think to make this district-wide, we need that stipend position piece in place at every school, just to make somebody responsible where it's not the principal, that's kind of a unique situation, or the custodian, because it's not feasible when there's one custodian who has to clean up the cafeteria too.
Mm-hmm. Is there any connection to what the benefit of doing this is at the schools? Like, do we have the kid, do we capture how the volume of food waste that's being diverted and what the benefit of that is from a climate perspective or anything?
So at the beginning of this program, Blackbear was our partner. Mm-hmm. And then they went out of business now with Nope. But with Blackbear, he had really good metrics he reported out on. And with both, Blackbear more than Nope, they will bring finished compost back to the site. It's been a little more difficult with Nope, but Eric was really great at doing that. Like they'd have a help day, United Way, Day of Caring, and we'd deliver compost out to the schools who were doing garden projects. That wasn't necessarily their food that was being composted, but it was part of that operation.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'd love to see that to, really anchor in why we want to do this in the first place. So that's super. Liz?
And we talked to, like, one of the things, Lindsay, that I added this after Monty and I chatted, where a virtual tour. So we did a recording last year of a virtual tour of Blackbear composting. And so the kids can actually see what happens to the compost in the process, like from start to finish. So it's a short video. I'd love to help, brainstorm stuff like that would be really educational and help connect those dots.
I think that's great. And some other efforts we've done have been really time intensive, of going to each classroom and talking to the kids, which is really impactful. But I think we need multiple ways to communicate that educational piece. And I know, Terry, you're an expert in that area.
Sounds like we need a composting ambassadors program. Go ahead, Liz.
This is a little off the trail here, but Lindsay, are you at the schools talking to anyone, do you know, about working with local producers to buy the food? I'm thinking like of the large hydroponic operation down in Schuyler, which is down in Esmont. It would love to work with the schools to sell greens, and then there's a whole lot of other property around his facility, and I don't know what else he grows, but I'm thinking about taking the compost or using the compost or whatever. Is there anything going on with local producers?
With local producers to accept the finished compost or to provide food to the cafeterias?
Well, both. I mean, to sell to the schools. And I'm thinking, what I think about is I know in the valley, some of the schools are buying from the hydroponic farms. I've heard that. And I'm just wondering if the school system here, so we might be able to get something going both ways. Is my thought with the composting.
Christina Pitzenberger is the director of child nutrition, and she has a great program with the farm at Red Hill, and they do the hummus platters at all the schools. That's the only very local connection I know about, but there may be more. That one's just, I eat that hummus platter when I go to school, so I'm really aware of it. As far as the finished compost back to the producers might be a little difficult because it goes, you know, it would go off our site and
go to Blackbear.
Go somewhere else to become finished compost.
Yeah, I just was thinking about that place because he has so much extra land right around the facility, and I'm not sure how he uses the rest of that land. But anyway, so who would I talk to about that? About using local producers at the schools?
That Christina Pitzenberger is the director of child nutrition, but I can, if you have some good contacts, I can forward those on to her.
Okay, I'll send you some. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Sorry, let me just chime in that, you know, what I'd certainly like to do to take the composting and the recycling opportunity is whenever we, and this is something that I think Terry and both Lindsay said requires more thought. And so I'm probably the least experienced maybe on this call of any of this stuff. But I know the reason I'm sitting here is because when I was a kid that I saw like nature shows and my dad sat me down and talked to me about that stuff. And I think that we know a lot of the best thing is just not to use, right? I mean, recycling, composting is all great, but if we didn't waste, you know, half a chicken or whatever to begin with. So I think if, you know, if we could turn this when we roll this out into some kind of education where we maybe also touch on something like that. And I was a camp counselor for a number of years. We talk about the clean plate club. Don't take more than you can eat. And that doesn't mean slam 1,000 French fries, but you know, that there's some things we could go there that I think if we can teach these kids early, you know, how they can just the rest of their lives be ambassadors for it. And it's like a force multiplier of all we want to do. So it just seems to me like it's a great opportunity to hopefully make the most of it.
Is there food waste curricula anywhere? I mean, I know some organizations that do it, but I'm just wondering more locally, is there any food waste curricula?
The master gardeners have a whole program for composting. And so they have the curriculum for like the schoolyard garden and the importance of composting and organisms that break down food waste. So, and it's aligned with the SOLs. So it may be a great thing to, especially at the elementary school level. But I just want to say that, you know, I have gone through this at my school at Tan Friends School, and just like the whole process of trying to get the school community on board, and can be really challenging. And one thing that I think is really important is, will there be I'm really excited to hear that there'll be composting in the kitchen, but what sort of training will that staff get? Because I think that's so important that they understand why it's happening and the value of it. And also just what materials are going to be available? Lindsay, will do all the schools? I know maybe the question of whether school lunches are going to be served or not is probably maybe up in the air, but are those trays all compostable? And what about the serviceware, like the silverware? Is that plastic, or are any reusable trays being used anymore?
In regular times, yes. So typically the elementary level would only go to the compostable trays if they were short-staffed. But otherwise it's reusable there. High schools are mostly the compostables. The child nutrition director almost has everything switched over to compostable materials, except for a couple serving cups. Like one of them was melting too fast, you know, kind of disintegrating too quickly when it had cold fruit in it. So she couldn't use that one anymore. And there was another, the forks and spoons and knives are just, they're too expensive for her budget at this time to get the compostable version. So if anybody knows of vendors that are comparable, I know that's a tricky one, but that's the one piece where she's struggling to find the compostable alternative.
So if the COVID go ahead, is that the hope to go back to those reusable trays? Is that the plan? As long
once
as
we
COVID
get
allows.
back to, again, we don't know exactly what the service is going to look like next year. So when service goes back to normal, yes. But if they're eating in classrooms, probably not. Or if it's dictated that it's going to be grab and go, no.
So what did you say about the utensils? Utensils are all plastic?
Yes.
And is that a safety reason? I just remember when I was a kid, it was all metal, as I recall.
I'd have to check with Christina, but I think a lot of it was loss of the silverware into the trash.
Got it.
That's the question I had. I was going to ask about, using reusable implements, metal. And I assume when you use the reusable trays, those have to be washed in a hot water wash or something. So I was thinking that the utensils could go in the same washing machine, maybe not.
I'm fairly certain they can. I think they're in a different kind of tray. But I think her major issue was losing them into the trash.
Yeah.
But again, if you have composting set up and you have a monitor there, it may be more helpful to not lose those things.
Because that'd be huge, right? I mean, if we could go to metal, I mean, how much does that save?
I know when I was also a camp counselor and worked in the kitchen a few times, but at least the industrial washing machine could do both the trays and the silverware. But yeah, we did lose some of it to the trash. Like it's going to happen. But yeah, if you have somebody helping with compost or whatever, then you can kind of help avoid that as well, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, a trash monitor, but also if you have a system, instead of kids going right to the garbage can, they have to go through something where, they have the system. It's almost like picking up your food where you put your silverware down. I did trash monitoring in elementary school, and it was, they're all fighting and everything and, crazy before it. They're not paying any attention to what's going into the bin. So you have to kind of like corral them into a point where they're actually focused enough to do any sorting. So yeah.
Can Margaret just, can I put you on the spot, Margaret, and just comment on Lindsay's problem with the schools getting compostable stuff at a reasonable price? Do you have anything to add, given your profession and where you work now?
I mean, typically compostables are a little bit more expensive. I was wondering if there are any.
Margaret, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
I don't know why you're.
Here we go.
Not really. It's all fuzzy.
Sounds like that one robot on Star Wars.
What about now?
Yep. Now you sound
Okay.
perfect.
Yeah. Sorry. Something was going on with my, I could hear you all fine. Something was going on with my earbuds. No, I'm not surprised to hear that the compostables are more expensive. They typically are a little bit more expensive to purchase. I was wondering, with the whole Virginia state movement to banning single-use plastics, if there might be state procurement contracts that would be large enough, there'd be enough volume that it would help bring prices down. I don't know that for sure, but that would be one suggestion or one idea.
Great thought.
That's a great idea.
Because I think it's going to be, if everything on the tray isn't compostable, it's going to be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
If people are going to have to pick and sort and, knowing what is and isn't, and then making sure that it gets into the right bin, I think that's setting the program up for quite a challenge.
But we'll always have, and you have a percentage of kids that are bringing lunches from home too. So we're not going to avoid that totally ever.
Right.
I do think that we need to check with Nope and Blackbear how they feel about cutlery, because a lot of composters really, they will filter cutlery out because it usually does not compost in their time frame of their operation. So I think that's something we would want to check as well.
Is your organization, Margaret, working with the states at all on things like this as to, you know, or larger composters to deal with cutlery?
I mean, yes, we deal with composters. We have a composter committee. And there are a lot of composters that will accept cutlery, and don't have problems with it. It depends on what their processes are like and, how long they're letting things compost and all of that. So there's definitely variability in that. We're not working like directly with, school districts or that kind of thing that I'm aware of with trying to get compostables into lunchrooms, but we definitely are working with states, with EPR policies and trying to, bolster composting infrastructure in particular, because it's great to have all these compostable things out there. But if there's nowhere to compost them, it's kind of pointless or, less beneficial. We are not working in Virginia, though, to my knowledge. That is not one of the states where we're actively involved right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Christine, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Lindsay, how can SWAAC be helpful? And, we do have this recycling ambassador program, and I just want to volunteer myself. I'd be happy to go into a school and, to help out at lunchtime, if that would be helpful at all. And I know that Monty and I are interested in reaching out to schools and in whatever capacity, but even beyond that, just as a former teacher and, running a program in my school, I'd be happy to provide whatever assistance I could, whether it's talking to other teachers or helping out during lunch.
That would be during lunch, definitely. I think that kind of ambassador model will be really helpful because you need somebody there, especially at the beginning of the program. And I think the educational piece for that launch part would be really helpful too.
And maybe there's a possibility of recruiting master gardeners to help out.
I think that's a great idea. So Lindsay, I would just invite you, like based on the conversation you've heard today, if after this meeting there are any thoughts you have on how SWAAC could help, what you think the schools need, is it help on, I think it sounds like there needs to be some curricula on why bother doing, food waste and composting. It's not just the composting process, but what's the benefit of it, and whether there's some staffing we could help with or other things. And I have a particular idea, as a follow-up on this, but I'm going to wait till we're through this discussion first. So I'll just put that out there. Christine, anything else?
No. Yeah. And thank you. I'm really excited to have this discussion and look forward to continue to work on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for all of your hard work. And I also want to say that I noticed we have a lot of the ambassadors who are on. So thank you all, especially for working in such hot weather. So just as a follow on to that, I am on the Plastic Waste Pollution Advisory Council and was volunteered to be the chairperson. So it's a lot of work. It's like day commitments, driving to Richmond and, 6-hour meetings. But our first report has to come out by the end of October. We need to have a draft. The report is theoretically due in early November. So I have actually worked on setting up an agenda for meetings. So these meetings will be published. We already had the first one. I think what would be really helpful, there's a first part of the meeting where we go through a bunch of stuff, but at the end there is a public portion of that meeting. I think it would be really excellent for some of you to participate in one of those public portions and say, it would be really helpful if there was state procurement support for compostable food serviceware in you know, schools and other places that are trying to comply with EO 77. So just as a thought, I mean, I can put that in there. It's much more powerful if it comes through, I think, the public participation and all the people who are on there. So I can let you know when those meetings are going to be held. They're not scheduled yet, but they will be. So I did want to just give you a little background on this committee. So it's super focused. You know, pretty much all we're talking about right now is the single-use plastic items. The committee will meet, or the advisory council will meet, you know, for theoretically 2 years into 2022. And then the scope will expand, but for this first reporting and grouping of recommendations, it's super focused on sort of single-use items. And I will say I was a bit disappointed, you know, when I heard it was so narrow. But I think after that, issues around how to reduce the use of plastics, how do you grow the circular economy comes into play. The conversation will broaden. The Virginia Manufacturers Association is on the committee, as well as a public health group. So I think there are 4 of us committee members. One woman's from a nonprofit up in Nova, professor from JMU, professor from Virginia Tech, and myself. So one of the interesting things is they brought to my attention, there is another executive order to form a waste diversion and recycling task force. They have not been appointed yet. That group is supposed to form quickly, and it will have, you know, a broader scope around solid waste regulations and also recycling. I think it's critical that we input into that committee, because it's very clear, you know, there's overlap of these 2 committees. They're very connected, but the way they're going to run them, DEQ is going to run them is quite independently. And so I think in my role in this EO 77 advisory committee, I don't think there's a lot of the opportunity to have any influence on recycling programs or, you know, I think broader topics is not going to occur in that committee. It's going to occur in this other one. So I wanted to make you all aware of that. So, you know, policy recommendations are certainly part of the discussion. I will just note that the Virginia Manufacturers Association has chosen the head of the plastics division from ACC to be his delegate when he can't participate. So I know Keith Chrisman quite well, but I, you know, you can see the politics at play in the committee. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you a heads up on all that, because I think you'll be really interested in what these committees are doing, and there is this opportunity to weigh in. And so it just seemed like for what we're doing, you know, I think some of the things we've talked about in our committee, from need for improved MRF infrastructure, you know, better access within, you know, our solid waste district. And I think one of the things that was very clear, that most people have no understanding of how communities are organized around solid waste and recycling, at least in my committee. I think generally people thought, oh, it's automatic curbside recycling because I live in a large city or something. So I think that's very important that, you know, a county like ours, it's very dependent on drop off, you know, and we have subscription service, you know, we bring that to their attention, that that's a big part of Virginia operates that way and doesn't have automatic curbside service. So the other thing I wanted to bring up is that, and Melanie, I'm also thinking of you here. There is a young woman from Charlottesville, Albemarle County, who is very interested in potentially joining the SWAAC. Her name is Marion Carter. She went to college down in, where did she go? I want to say Randolph-Macon. But she's very interested in learning more about how we do things in recycling in the county. So she's interested in joining the SWAAC. So I'm going to invite her to fill out her application. currently she's working, she's a manager at ACAC, but I was pretty excited to have sort of a new person and young blood, very dedicated to the issues we cover here. So I was going to invite her to, join a meeting and check us out. I just didn't have a chance to get it done for this meeting. So Melanie, if you have similar interests, just let me know, because I'm looking for more people to join our committee. And likewise, if you know of people who you think might be interested, please pop me an email and let me know.
Sure. Thanks so much, Anne.
Great. I don't have any more unless there's discussion folks would like to have. Christine's thinking, I can see it. Anything else to bring up?
Hey, Ann, it's Monty. I'm interested in trying to get some of these other restaurants, facilities, everything to kind of ride the coattails of what UVA and everybody else is doing. It sounds like, I don't know, you tell me is the best thing. It's a price issue, right? They're using this cheap styrofoam and stuff because it's cheap. And probably the only way it would make sense to do something different is if they could get some kind of volume discount, like what y'all are talking about with the state purchasing contract or something. I don't know, I'm just trying to make some progress there, and I haven't made much. If it's something that should just kind of wait, or we could talk about it again offline, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very, so, obviously EO 77 doesn't impact commercial operations now. But, it could be interesting, if we do a little bit more homework and find out, I think, Jesse, you're going to have some great recommendations. There might be interest in a meeting from some of these restaurants just to learn more about what's out there. How do you know if it's good or not? I think there's a lot of questions there that maybe we could, with this group, provide some helpful insights for folks on that. And then, we can't solve the pricing problem for them, obviously, but, maybe they could have a buying group or something like that. I do want to say that I think this could come up, that this is one of the things this is, sort of interesting, that if people bring up the topic of climate change and some of these options, they're not always going to be climate winners. And I will tell you just generally, it's very hard to beat expanded polystyrene on a climate basis, because, as Phil said, it's air. It involves very little actual material. And so often when you move into some of the alternatives, there might not be, you might be moving from one thing that's not recyclable, but moving into something that actually has a larger climate impact in its manufacture. And I think that's, there are certainly people in our community that may bring that sort of topic up. And I think that that's where we really want to, make sure that we have these systems in place to manage it and all of that sort of thing, that that we can offer the sort of complete solution if we move into these materials, because then we know, we're really taking care of it versus just adding it up year over year over year in a landfill.
Yeah, so, especially to get it in a compost bin at the end of its use. And, I think there's so much education that needs to happen. I've been monitoring, helping out at the Ix Farmers Market with composting there. And it is so interesting how people just have so little knowledge about what can and cannot be composted.
Well, I think the other thing is about 40%, 30% of what goes into a ton of MSW is organic in some component. I think about 13 or 14% of it is food waste. I don't have the statistics off my hand, but we're driving it a really long distance to go to a landfill where it'll turn into methane. And so, Jesse, I've been very keen to try to model what a more local solution for food waste management is, because we're talking something that's hyper local, where we have composters within 60 miles or so, and I think the benefit of not transporting wet organic waste long distances is substantial. And I think it would be really good for this committee to put that information together and put that picture together, that there's a huge benefit to more local management of our waste, and then creating a product that has benefit in other ways as well.
And can I interrupt to ask a question there? Has anyone heard an update about Panorama?
Yeah.
With their accepting food waste, and speaking of a more local solution?
I actually talked to, is it Margaret over there?
Mm-hmm. Mary Margaret or Margaret Mary?
Margaret, yeah. I called her up, and because I was just interested in if they were accepting food waste, because I know Blue Ridge School used them. And she said that, I mean, they're not quite ready, but I talked about the possibility of like Albemarle High School and Jack Jewett, if we were to get some type of program going, could they accept that? And she was definitely open to it. And what was also interesting is she's like, well, we have all these kids who run cross country over there. So like they have a relationship with the farm already. So she thought that perhaps they would make really great ambassadors for the program as well. So I felt like there was an opening for a partnership there with Panorama. And it sounds like they're just sort of on the cusp of being ready to accept food waste locally.
And just for my understanding, they're only going to be accepting commercial food waste, right? They're not going to do residential.
They are accepting material. They are not transporting. They are not picking up. They are not doing anything of that sort.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right now, I talked to Margaret 3 weeks ago, and they're working on their recipe and getting themselves scaled. So they're doing like Blue Ridge. What is that? Something in space coffee.
Going in space.
Yeah. And a couple select things that have a very stable product that delivers to them until they feel like they can get what they need squared away. And then they're looking at entertaining and expanding, because I talked with them about, what about us? What about our material? Because I'm a little worried. We've had problems with Gill, which is where Nopes goes. And I guess, Lindsay, this probably applies to you too. If McGill were to go offline, then we're really going to have a scramble real quick on where to send material.
Right.
Because I think Royal Oak is not really open for broad business.
Is there any chance that they could go offline for the septic sludge?
Biosolids?
Bill?
There's a whole lot
the
of
biosolids.
biosolids. I mean, yes, they could.
You have choices for that.
Yeah, landfill.
Oh, I'm sorry. It sounded like, is there a chance that when you talk about them being in some kind of situation that might be precarious, are you talking about they might not take biosolids too, or just the compost, the food compost?
It'd be biosolids as well. I just have some questions about their organization. They seem to be having things right now. Biosolids may be a total different issue because of PFAS. Right now, Sierra Club's looking to try and ban any reuse of biosolids, as far as I understand. So the only thing that would be available to that would be incineration or landfilling.
But biosolids are a regulated stream, right?
Yeah.
Through the health department.
The health department.
Well, let's do a follow-up on that one as well then, maybe.
Yeah,
All right, guys.
We'll just have to wait until we hear. I don't think, McGill's not going to come out and tell us, say, hey, we're getting twitchy here and we might fall apart. But,
And before we go, I just want to mention one thing. VACO is the Virginia Association of Counties, works a lot with procurement issues, trying to organize counties on procurement. So I'm just going to check with them as to what kind of process they would have to look at compostable things in general for schools or whatnot, and just ask that question since they're involved in it anyway. So.
And then I just want to bring up one thing. I think, I can't remember, this is where I always leaned on Teddy for reminding me of these things. I think next month we have to look at the election of SWAAC positions again, or is that in September? I can't remember. Jesse, Peggy, you remember? It feels like it happens in August, if I recall.
Again, I can go back and look at minutes and see when we elected.
Yeah.
Christine and you and me last year. What month was that?
So I would like everybody to think about this, because I would like to see the chair for next year. I'm happy to stay on the committee, but would like somebody to take over the chair obligations. So, you know, if everybody can give some thought to that, who might want to do what, that would be great if you have that in your back pocket for our next meeting.
And I just want to say that right now I'm the chair of the Natural Heritage Committee, so I know that I'm supposed to just be filling in behind you, Anne, but I actually don't want to do that. I would do it for a short term, but I prefer not to do it for a long term as well.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Well, also, I think you are doing such a fine job on communications. If you like the communications role, I think, you know, you made so much happen there. That's fantastic. So is there anybody who's interested in sharing? Silence.
Yeah, there's nobody ever interested.
All right, well, we can have that. I'll put some time on the agenda next time for that. And Peggy has been doing minutes for a very long time. And she's fantastic at it, but I'm also very sensitive that, you know, you might want to change your role as well. So, all right. Well, let's think about that, guys, before the next meeting, and Peggy and I will go through the minutes and look up, you know, where we're supposed to be on these things. I don't know about you guys, but COVID has sort of totally messed up my sense of time. And so we'll do that. But anyhow, thank you all. I guess we'll call it a day and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.